Dear guests and dear audiences, welcome to our panel in the scope of social inclusion and participation of immigrants through media literacy, which is funded by the European Union. The topic of today's panel is on the combating discrimination in media, powerful narratives, and societal change. I have very special two speakers today. The first one is the Enrique Tesseri, who is a sociologist and working on the immigration and racism. He is also an author of the European Islamophobia Report and the editor of the Migrant Tales. Welcome, Enrique.
Thank you very much, Isabel.
And our second speaker is Associate Professor Dr. Rabun Kurilla. He is working on the communication and culture, intercultural and transcultural communication. And he is also a member of Turkish-German University. Welcome, Robin. We can't hear you, Robin. Can you please turn on your microphone?
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for turning on your microphone. Now we can start with Enrique. We can hear your words. The floor is yours, Enrique.
Thank you very much. Let me put here the slide. How do we? Oh, here it is. Okay, good. Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me. And I mean, my relationship with journalism goes way back. I used to be a journalist myself for 20 years and wrote for newspapers like the Financial Times, that worked for the BBC, and so forth. And but then through my sociological studies and things like that, I became interested also in how the media influences certain narratives. And we did a study, a report that was published in 2023. You have the link here. And it was made possible thanks to a grant from the Empowerment and Resilience Fund of the European Network Against Racism, which is the biggest NGO in the European Union. So if we go here, I mean, how many of you have heard of Finland? I mean, of the media there. These are some of the main newspapers, media in Finland. And this is Migrant Tales. Now, you may ask yourself, what are we going to do with all these toxic narratives and the attacking of minorities, of Muslims, and so forth? And my answer to that 17, 18 years ago was Migrant Tales, a blog that I founded back then. Now, where does this blog come from? I mean, you might think that you are sometimes defenseless against the media, but that's not the case. I originally was born in Argentina in 1977, 76, 74, 76, 83. We had a terrible military regime there. And there was one paper that came out, a very modest paper, an English language paper, that wrote about human rights violations and so forth. Okay, that newspaper became famous because it wrote about topics that were censored at that time and had found a space, an audience like that. Okay. This is the report that we did, Finnish media coverage of youth gangs and the security guards. Now, I don't know how it is in Turkey or it is in other European countries, but I guess it's the same. But basically, what happens is that when we have elections in Finland, the populist anti-immigration party, called the Finns Party, they always exploit an immigrant-migrant theme. And they did this also they did this in 2011, 2015, 2019, and now in 2023 election, they did the same thing. They went to Sweden, and in Sweden, as you know, has a very severe gang problem. They have tens of thousands of youths who are in gangs, kill each other, and it's pretty tough. And there are many reasons why there are gangs in Sweden. One could be that lack of services and dead end careers or lives in that country. But anyway, the idea was that the Finns party said, this is our theme. We're going to exploit gang violence in Finland. But the problem is there are no gangs. I mean, there were only maybe like 100 to 200 gangs in Finland, estimated by the police at the time. But they always talked about potential problems. And guess what the media did? Well, the media started to exploit this topic. Here you have an example. This is very small, but the red one means after the Swedish elections. The white ones is before the Swedish elections. And as you can see, the media really started to pick up on these stories, and also in social media, they started to feed this topic. And here you have an example of some newspapers. And as you can see, the rise in stories about gangs, the youth gang problem in Finland rose exponentially, and also social media. But then you may ask yourself this question: why did the media not ask questions like, well, is this such a big problem? Why are we writing so much about this? Why are we talking about so much about this? And then we had these kinds of situations. These are some stories that the Finnish media has written. How do you like this one? 10,000 illegal refugees. That's funny. I mean, how could a refugee be illegal? A refugee is a refugee, right? He seeks asylum. This story in the middle talked about there was no rape, sexual assault wave in Finland during the summer, because they thought that, okay, now foreigners are coming to Finland, they're going to start, sexually, abusing our women. But there was none. And this was a story that said that no, there was nothing. And this was another story written in the early 90s where it said that the Somalis had tricked the authorities into giving them asylum. So as you can see, the media has been very hostile to migrants. Okay, so you think, okay, Finns are very nice people. They're quiet. They're pretty level-headed. This is a story by MTV. MTV is the biggest commercial television station in Finland. The one on the left, they talk about gang violence. And look at the pictures. Look at how they framed the topic. Now, remember what I said, 100 to 200, of estimated gang members. And the other one is basically the stories that they wrote, that little kids, that young youths are robbing people in the street and so forth, and creating this kind of havoc. And this is the one I really think is incredible. It says that the government plans to tighten integration policy. That picture of that woman there is the Minister of Interior. Isn't that incredible? So this is a little bit about the situation there. Now, one thing that I want to mention that I've learned, from this report, is this thing: when context is left out of the story, when you leave context out, you leave the door open for bias. So if I was going to write something about a certain group, I wouldn't mention all the things that are important. Just the things that I think give the story more credibility from my point of view. And here are some questions that we looked at in the hundreds of stories that we studied. The headline: does it correctly reflect the story's content? Photos: do they reinforce stereotypes or misconceptions? Now, you're Muslims, right? Okay. So what about if I was going to write a story about Muslims and I would put a picture of a minaret there, and then in the background would be stormy, and I would be talking about Muslims? Why couldn't it be a story with birds, with peace, with sun, and so forth? So the pictures play an important sources. source in there. And then the other important thing is that there's usually hardly ever any minorities interviewed in the story. So you have maybe a white person telling us that there's no racism or there's no problem, when actually they don't interview anyone who is maybe from the racialized community and like that. So I always look at that. What does the story leave out? And that kind of like tells it, tells the problem. Okay. So you may ask, what do we do? What are we up against? I suggest that we have a lot of ways to challenge this. We can do it politically. We can also write. We can demonstrate, and we have to do these things. But in Argentina, we had a lot of military governments, and every time a military government rose, people would say to each other, "Well, evil does not last 100 years, so one day it ends." And this is what I think we should look at also when we look at the media. The media in Finland, what it writes, how it frames migrants, Muslims, and things like that, I think it's very similar in other countries, in Germany, in England, and so forth. But anyway, that is what I wanted to share with you about our report and a little bit about Finland. And remember, we're the happiest country in the world. How do you explain that?
Yeah, it is really challenging being at the same time the happiest country in the world and experiencing all the things that you said. Yeah. So thank you, Enrique, for your presentation. And Professor Dr. Rabi, we can listen your presentation now.
Yeah, thanks again for having me. Coincidentally, the other day I talked about Finland, and it was supposed to be the land with the country with the highest suicide rate as well, while being the most happiest country. So, but it was just 2 days ago. It just reminded me. My short presentation won't be so illustrative, and it's a bit more focused on media literacy, because this was a topic that I originally had expected. And so I will start addressing the rise of populism. You've seen that the other day in Germany. You also see it in Spain and France, of course, in the Netherlands with Geert Wilders. And it has been on the rise for 10 years or more now, at least a decade. And well, the core of populism is usually that political actors pretend to fight corrupt elites, like economic, academic, political, especially, whatever elites, in the name of the people. And well, just to name one very telling, very famous narrative conspiracy theory, you can call it the Great Replacement of Camus. According to which supposedly the European white population is about to be replaced or culturally invaded. And this is sustained by all types of elites. So this feeds into this populist narrative. And the success of this narrative, however, is not created up over it or in vacuum. It's also connected to shifts in the political spectrum. We have seen in the last decades that the leftist politics of recognition was eventually replaced, redistribution, was replaced by a politics of recognition, meaning that a critique of capitalism and its consequences has shifted to politics of human rights and minorities. Some say even that the left is now pursuing a progressive neoliberalism, which is subject to debate. But well, this is exactly the point where the new right enters the sphere. According to Hans-Georg Betz, the right has used those shifts to redefine its political enemy. It's not the old left. It's not the people from abroad in the first place. It's more the press, the academics, multinational companies, everyone who propagates multiculturalism and open borders. And the left's shift away from a politics of redistribution towards a politics of recognition definitely helped to build a regime of political correctness, which the right attacks in order to become more popular. It has to do with the fact that some people might feel let down by politics. They feel that politics focus on categorical ideals rather than on people. And there's this keyword, new realism, that the right uses to combat this so-called regime of political correctness. It means that they pretend to say things as they are. I have a quick example for that. During the 2020 election campaign in the US, Donald Trump repeatedly used the term Kung Flu, China virus, Chinese virus, and other terms to refer to COVID-19 or the so-called coronavirus. The press reacted to this by stating it's racist language, racist term. It's the latest effort to stoke xenophobia, among other many things. Trump, in turn, reacted to the press. He just said, because it comes from China, quote unquote. It's not racist at all. It's another quote. Not at all. It comes from China. I want to be accurate. Then in another context, he compared it to other diseases, like, for instance, Lyme disease, saying it comes from Lyme, Connecticut. Ebola comes from a river. The name was coined by referring to a river. So what I want to show with this political correctness, yes, political correctness, no, is that there might be, some people doubt it, some degree of polarization that societies face. And I'm a communication scholar, so I asked myself, how can you overcome it? Or from what communicative processes this polarization, if it exists, might be caused. And I've identified briefly 5 barriers of understanding that seem to maintain, create, perpetuate differences or divides in society. I will just, I mean, there are more. I've just chosen those 5 because I think they're very obvious. First of all, the guiding difference of political communication seems to be moralized. At least according to Carl Schmitt, political communication is guided by the distinction of friend and enemy. That doesn't mean that we have to hate each other. It's just like we are opponents. We can still have a meal together after debates in certain variations according to how this distinction is handled. You can handle it economically without emotion, saying, me and my friends, we are lucrative. The others, our enemies, are not. You can handle it aesthetically. Me and my friends, we are beautiful. The others, our enemies, are not. Or you can handle it morally, and then political communication gets corrupted because people don't try anymore to understand the other side of the political spectrum. The credo seems to be bad people can't have good arguments. And this is not only true for parliaments and other political institutions, but also for everyday life. Another barrier of understanding, which is connected to this one, is the description of value-laden emotions. That's not a new phenomenon. Even in the First World War, Max Scheler, as a propagandist, ascribed love to Germans and greed to the British as the driving forces of the war. Most often, those descriptions now and then are mutually reversed. the German right-wing movement Pegida is often facing the reproach of spreading hatred. But they, in turn, self-identify with the emotions of concern or maybe anxiety of like an invasion of Europe. And yeah, they in turn also say, no, it's the left and the right, that's their political enemy. They spread hatred. They spread hatred against Europeans, against Germans, and whatever. The same is true for Trump. He calls his movement or considers his movement as being based on love, whereas his opponents are driven by hatred, which is counterintuitive because Trump very often faces the allegation of inciting hatred and so forth. It's not only the moral connotations these emotions carry that are an obstacle to communication. It's also very visible that nowadays society seems to lack empathy, and because they don't understand the emotions of the other side. Like, it can be due to political reasons, but well, interviews would, I'm sure, show that those people actually believe that they don't spread hatred but love, and the other way around. The lack of empathy, or with the words of Adam Smith, inter-emotionality prevents the creation of intersubjectivity. I mean, this is very interesting in a book of Adam Smith, The Moral Sentiments. The third barrier of understanding is created by highly ritualized models of communication in social media. Well, ritualized communication is a type of communication that follows a strict institutionalized pattern. And digitalization has made possible ritualized communication with an unprecedented degree of standardization. You know, emojis, likes, pre-configured reactions, and repeated hashtags such as Black Lives Matter, Me Too, are a good illustration for that. While rituals, without doubt, connect people by confirming the continuity of a relationship, they are certainly not the best way to create mutual understanding. Standardization disregards individual differences. Individual cases just appear as variations of a type, which can be misleading in the context of social and cultural differences, which modern societies are faced with. The kinds of rituals that have been established form another problem. They are rather confrontation than dialogic models. This becomes particularly obvious in novel forms of public protests, be it shitstorms, hashtag campaigns, coordinated hacking attacks, and so forth. They might create public attention and, when successful, lay pressure upon their opponents. They are not dialogical in nature and don't promote understanding. I'm not saying that they are not necessary. I'm just saying that they just don't promote understanding. Of course, they are necessary to engage in public discourse in whatever form. So, and then we have the crisis of public institutions, at least some of them. And on the other hand, you have a triumphant progress of highly standardized subjectivities. The main institution that is in crisis is truth, which traditionally was provided by science and journalism with their respective work ethics. I mean, journalism has been facing a crisis for a long time. This crisis also concerns competition with non-professional providers of news that become increasingly influential. They're, of course, good actors and bad actors. This is particularly noticeable due to the success of social media and the supranational parcellation of national public spheres. There seems to be an institutionalization of different criteria of truth in multiple public spaces, which is, from an ethnographic viewpoint, a very exciting process, not so, unfortunately, considering its polarizing consequences. The fragmentation of public spheres has led to the fragmentation of some institutions. As a result, there's often no common ground as a basis for a shared understanding of things. In addition, there seems to be a decrease of reflexivity. This is the other side, the ability of distancing oneself from one's own stances and opinion, which gives way to a triumph of hypersensitized subjectivities, which I was referring to in the beginning of this point. The institutions of civil and academic discourses fall prey to this crisis of reflexivity. It sometimes takes the form of a conflict between the imperative of being woke and resistance to it. There's also no understanding. Those two sides don't get closer to each other. And the last point that I have is rather amplifying already existing barriers of understanding, and it's the economic dynamics in which social media platforms operate. Testimonies of former Facebook employees and leaked documents reveal that Facebook is set to maximize two parameters: its traffic and engagement. At least at the time of this revelation, the parameters served as incentives for employees and governed the algorithms that selected the content users were presented with. Accordingly, the profit of the company would grow the more time users spent on its sites and interacted with the content. According to whistleblower Frances Haugen, the metrics of traffic and engagement can best be maximized by controversial or angry content. It follows that reactions, comments, and reshares, so-called meaningful social interactions, whatever that is, increase when divisive content is presented because it's unexpected. So I engage with it, I criticize it, but I'm staying on the sides and so generate profit. Haugen suspects a positive correlation of societal polarization and the economic success of Facebook. Being unlikely, potentially polarizing content, misinformation may be amplified because it generates traffic and engagement. So the distribution of polarizing content and fake news may be a source of profit, at least for some companies. Maybe one concluding remark: I think the insight of those dynamics of communication and the creation of barriers of understanding can improve media literacy also for migrants when they come to other countries and already know what dynamics are behind the discourses they are now facing. Even though those discourses might have slightly different parameters in different countries, there seems to be at least a similar communicative dynamics in play that creates those narratives. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation, Rubin. And I want to ask a question first to Enrique. And dear Enrique, you mentioned that a lot of media institutions are stresses the potential problems of the youth gangs. So I understand that because of there is no really big danger of these groups currently, they had to make fake news about the danger or the potential problems of these groups. Am I right? What do you think about that?
Well, I think Professor Kulila answered that question with with making fake news and things like that, exaggerating, a problem, and it's incredible to note how gullible the public is, But real fast thing. So if I exploit this story, okay, and I'm the media, what do I get? I get more traffic.
Yeah.
If the police says, yes, we have a problem, what will the police get? They will get more money to fight youth gang problems. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, everybody wins here. It's a win-win. And politicians, when they do this, they get more votes because they're defending, security and things like that. So everybody wins in that sense, except for the mighty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And dear Robin, I have a question for you as well. You mentioned the political spectrum, and you said that usually people don't try to understand other people in the spectrum. What do you think about if we should try to understand the other groups, And does it help to decrease the hate speech in the media?
Who are you asking this question? Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's a two-sided sword, or arma con doble fila, like the Spanish say, because understanding in the first place is a great thing to do until you reach a point that Anna Freud called identification with the aggressor. That means you might not go to the police if someone does harm to you. And so you're blocked, you're rather paralyzed because you identify while you understand others. But there's also a more distanced kind of understanding. It's more like an ethnographic understanding, meaning that I don't have to really understand and be on the side of the opposed spectrum, but at least understand, like maybe a psychiatrist would understand the pathology of its patients. Why does a person react like that? Or an ethnologist would understand a certain tribe where there's black magic. He doesn't believe in that, but he knows what functions that has in the tribe and in the indigenous people. And I think this kind of understanding is definitely beneficial. If you really have to understand hatred that is directed towards you, I wouldn't say so. But it's interesting that you mentioned hate speech. Hate speech, xenophobia, and other terms. And in the French conservative movement, it's famille-phobie. That's from the other side of the political spectrum, so it's surprising. They are often used to ascribe certain emotions and even pathologize the other side. Yeah, it's homophobia. It's irrational because phobia has those connotations of being irrational. So on the one hand, we are faced here with a legal term, hate speech. On the other hand, it's part of the political dynamics because hate supposes a certain definition. You have to operationalize hate. And how do you do this? And from a legal point of view, I talked with a legal scholar lately, that there is not much of making an interview. It would be the action and the description of intentions. And so this very term hate speech is, on the one hand, of course, a legal term that has its function in the legal system. On the other hand, if it's used in the media, it's also attributing certain moral valuations to some people. Not saying that's bad, but this is what it does.
Yes, I understand. Thank you both for your valuable contributions to this panel. It was very great to be the moderator today, and I hope to see you in another opportunities. Have a good day.
Thank you so much. Hope to keep in touch.
Yeah, and we'll be in touch through the report then.
Yeah, we will.
Okay. Thank you. We're very good moderating.
Thank you.
Have a good